For decades, Richard Bach was certain his teaching days were behind him. He had written a wildly successful philosophical novel, Illusions, and he was firmly convinced that story would never need a sequel. He was also a master aviator. For 58 years, Bach had maintained a pristine flying record, taking to the skies without suffering a single injury. That streak ended violently on August 31, 2012. While attempting to land his experimental seaplane, the aircraft clipped high-tension wires and crashed inverted. Bach was left hanging upside down in the cockpit, unconscious, with a broken back and a severe traumatic brain injury. This sudden physical trauma shattered his comfortable status quo. The teacher who thought he had written his final lesson found himself abruptly forced right back into the role of a student. In the immediate aftermath, Bach lay in a hospital bed, kept alive by a respirator and heavy drugs. To the outside world, his body appeared almost completely lifeless. The medical staff delivered a grim prognosis. They explained that it would take at least a full year of intense rehabilitation just to relearn basic human functions like standing, walking, and speaking. But Bach was experiencing something entirely different. Inside his mind, the darkness lifted like a physical visor, transitioning into a vivid, open space colored like a bright summer afternoon. Floating in this sunlit sky, he arrived at a startling conclusion. The wrecked airplane, the broken spine, and the hospital room were actually a dream, and this bright sky was his true reality. While the doctors operated under the strict rules of biology and permanent injury, Bach was waking up to a completely different set of physical and spiritual laws. The mist in his mind eventually settled, revealing a golden, freshly cut hayfield. Parked in the grass were his familiar airplanes, and waiting for him there was an old friend. It was Donald Shimoda, the reluctant messiah and spiritual guide from his original book. Shimoda sat leaning against an airplane tire, looking exactly as he had decades earlier, completely untouched by the passage of time. Shimoda reminded him of a core philosophical rule. Humans are not physical bodies. They are pure consciousness, thought forms projecting an image of a body while writing their own subjective stories. Because the physical form is a projection, Shimoda argued that biological death and physical trauma do not actually exist as objective facts. They are simply powerful beliefs that a person chooses to accept. To overcome a severe physical disaster, you first have to recognize that your body is an illusion, and your mind is the only thing actually experiencing the event. This raised an obvious question. If Bach was truly the author of his own reality, why on earth would he actively choose to fly into power lines and shatter his own spine? The answer lies in how we learn. We deliberately write difficult, painful stories for ourselves because a state of perfect comfort doesn't force us to grow or acquire new understanding. The 2012 crash was a severe, self-authored test. Bach had written about spiritual healing for decades, but he needed a nearly fatal accident to force himself to actually put those theories into practice. Bach treated the wreckage as a classroom, a place where the abstract theory of thought forms had to meet the undeniable weight of gravity. When those two realities finally merged, Bach opened his eyes in the intensive care unit. But this time he was fully aware that the wires, the tubes, and his broken body were just a physical projection. Standing next to his bed was his wife. She acted as a guardian angel in the hospital room, actively reciting a clinical narrative of permanent brain damage offered by the medical staff. Instead of focusing on the monitors, she repeated a single, defining idea to him, that he was a perfect expression of love, and therefore it was impossible to suffer permanent injury. Faced with two conflicting realities, the objective data from the medical staff or his wife's subjective truth, Bach made a choice. He chose to believe her. This mental alignment with his wife's perspective began to pull his recovery away from the standard medical timeline. Within days, his cognitive function and physical coordination began returning at a rate that the hospital's long-term charts were never designed to record. His recovery did not take the agonizing year the hospital had predicted. By treating the injury as a belief rather than a biological certainty, he regained his independence in a fraction of the expected time. The ordeal cemented the final lesson of his philosophy. We write our own disasters, which means we inherently possess the power to rewrite the outcome. Bach realized that catastrophe is defined entirely by the observer. What the caterpillar calls the end of the world, the master calls a butterfly. Falling from the sky in 2012 served as the exact catalyst Bach required to finally prove to himself that, deep down, everyone is already indestructible.